Alright, so what I'm going to demonstrate really quickly is just a basic setup and some basic hand building techniques that everybody will likely use. You may not use the same exact vessel construction, but it'll be pretty similar if you're building anything that's vessel based. First things first, when you get everything set up, you need a board, the clay board for your table, and that way your clay doesn't stick to the surface of whatever you're working on. Of course, this has canvas on it, so it helps the clay from sticking, helps keep the clay from sticking anyways. Then you will need your tools, of course. Slip in this container. This is a mixture of clay and water. Rolling pin if you're planning on rolling out slabs, and along with these dowel rods, that'll definitely help. And then your clay, of course. The clay may be in a bunch of pieces depending on if it's been touched or not. And then I have a paper towel sitting here, which is something you would do at the end typically, but it's there anyways just to be ready so we can talk about storage toward the end of this. First things first, we have clay here in multiple pieces. And of course, when you first grab your clay, if it's in a bag full of pieces like this, your first intention is to squish this all together. If you think about it as you're squishing this together, you're kind of trapping air on the inside. You definitely want to get that out of there by wedging or kneading. A lot of people have used different terms for that anyways. And what I'm going to do in order to make sure that there's no air trapped inside of this is I'm just going to over and over again keep putting this clay on its side and squishing down to make sure the air is not getting trapped. At the same time as I'm squishing down, I'm trying not to fold the clay onto itself because I don't want to trap more air on the inside. And you can do this for about 15-20 seconds or so and you should be good to go. I'm going to keep putting it up on its side and just kind of pushing down, making sure I'm not folding it onto itself. And eventually you're going to divide this into a few pieces anyways, and it'll help alleviate some of the air that might be trapped. And what I'm going to do now is separate this so I can build a base for my vessel and leave some clay off to the side, a pretty good amount to make the slab side of the vessel. What I'm going to do to get the base going is I'm going to roll this clay out a little bit. I'm going to roll the slab out for the base, and then I'm going to roll a slab out for the actual side walls too. So I'm going to use the dowel rods off to the side of my clay, rolling pin to roll this thing out. And I have to move my tools off to the side a little bit to make some space for myself. And I'm going to roll this thing out both directions a little bit here and there and try to keep it somewhat even. And what I'm doing when I roll my pin this way is using the dowel rods as spacers to keep it an even amount of distance from the table, so it is an even amount of thickness from one end to the other. And I have basic shape. This might be a little bit on the small side for some of you, but it will definitely work for our purposes. I'm going to dip this in slip. I typically have water here too. You can use water to dip your tools in to keep your cuts nice and smooth, and it makes it a little bit easier to pass through the clay sometimes. And I'm just cutting a basic circle out of this. It might not be perfect the first time, but you can actually roll the entire vessel out to smooth out the sides if you want. There's a lot of different techniques you can use to do that. So I'm cutting my shape, removing the sides, so I have this circle left right here. Let's put this discarded clay off to the side. Put my base off to the side for a minute. And you can add these back together because this is going to be pretty well squished once I actually roll the pin over top of this again anyways. Give myself a little bit of room. And I'm going to squish this down a little bit to help it instead of hitting it with a pin right away since this is a bigger piece. And you want to think about how tall you want your vessel to be. The height of it's going to be from this side to this side. That's how tall it's going to be. And the length is just going to be how long the sidewall is around the outside circumference of the circle. I'm going to roll this thing out as quick as I can. And I have my slab rolled out basically. Now what you want to do before you start committing to cutting this thing is you want to make sure that your slab is long enough for the purpose of surrounding the outside of your vessel shape. Here's a trick to doing that. So I have my circle right here. I'm going to make one little notch as like a mark, like a rolling point. I'm going to start that mark that's right here on the edge of my clay to make sure it's going to be long enough. And I'm going to roll it until it stops again. And it stops right there, so this is definitely long enough. So I'm going to stop it right where that little mark is, which is right here. That's where I want to cut this thing off. And then what I'll do is maybe use these dowel rods to trim this thing down so it's pretty well even up both sides. So maybe about right here. This is going to be a very tall vessel, but for demo purposes it gives you an idea of how to do this. Remember, you can always add more clay if you need to. And we'll see how well this works anyways. Alright, so what I'm going to do at this point is, I have my sidewall prepped already. I'm going to start slipping and scoring the areas that I'm going to be putting together. So I'm going to score the area I know the wall is going to go on the outside. I can dip this and slip while I'm doing this if I want to. Scratch that up nice, almost like cross hatching if you're familiar with that. And then I'm going to score all the way up the side that I'm going to be attaching. You can use a serrated rib for this if you want to have all the teeth on it, so you can do multiple marks at once. I've seen people use forks. I've seen people modify credit cards to do this, making little teeth on the credit cards and make these scratching tools. Make things a little bit faster. Take a little bit of slip, put it onto the score marks. You definitely want to make sure you slip and score every single piece that you add to your project in order for this to survive drying time and firing. And again, you want to make sure that none of your clay is thicker than a 1/2 inch at any area. So I have that loaded up with slip and scratches, so scoring and slipping the sides. And then I'm going to attach this here. I'm going to wrap it around. It actually might be a little bit longer than I need, which is better than having it be a little bit shorter. It's totally fine. We can trim this a little bit if we need to. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to. So if it gets a little bit long, because I haven't pushed down on this, I can actually trim this off. So this actually might be good for some people to see. Like that. And we'll try to put it back on and add a little bit of slip back to it again. See if this fits a little bit better. And it seems to fit pretty decent. And don't forget to slip and score your other seams too, and then we can start to kind of fit this thing together. So we're going to slip that, slip that. Push those together. And you can start welding too. So remember, slip, score, and weld. What I'm doing with welding is just using my fingers for now anyways. I'm using a little bit of slip and just kind of rubbing the seams together, making sure the clay just kind of blends over the surface. And that's basically kind of a base process for putting a cylinder together. If you want to roll this thing out on a hard surface, you can, to kind of straighten up the sides a little bit. There is cracks and what have you that'll happen to the surface from stressing the clay too quickly and it's getting a little dry because I'm trying to work quickly. But other than that, it's a basic idea. You can see the seams are all together. It can be nice and straight. Of course, the clay's still flexible, so it's not perfectly circular, but you can still mold it, and it's got a nice flat bottom on it. And then of course you can add your details to the outside. So that is it. Hopefully this helps.